Hello and welcome to Experts Corner. This is Maheen Jafri. Today we'll be taking a look at the Middle East situation. First of all, the Gaza situation. World Health Organization says 15,000 people need emergency evacuation from the Gaza Strip, but the Rafah border remains closed. Also, bodies of 54 unidentified Palestinians have been sent by Israel and they have been buried in mass graves in Deir al-Balah. Another very significant development that has happened is the ICJ has ruled and reiterated Israel's obligation under international law, under Geneva Convention, and reminded it of its duties that it has to allow the basic aid in order for it to reach the people of Gaza. Also, it has warned not to use the starvation as a weapon of war. Also, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has hailed this decision, but another very important happening that we'd like to share is that Israel's parliament has passed a bill to annex the occupied West Bank. Now, there are lots of questions as to will it really happen? Will Israel listen to the rulings of International Court of Justice? And what would be the UN countries be doing in order to pressurize Israel into doing this? In the second segment, we will be discussing Pakistan's role in, of course, international diplomacy. It's a very important question because now at this time we see that Pakistan has been engaged in not only multilateral forum but also the bilateral relations, be it China or US. Pakistan's foreign policy also talks about resolution of conflicts with peace. And on the front of diplomatic efforts, we know that it is the initiatives range from mediation of Cold War to making efforts in the counterterrorism post 9/11. Now, lately Pakistan has made a lot of name in the global stage. Pakistan has really come forward, and it has a string and series of events, whether we talk about Pakistan defense pact with Saudi Arabia or securing a non-permanent membership at the UNSC for this year. We would be talking more about this, but first of all, let me introduce you the guests. For more, we have Farrukh K.Pitafi in studio with us, and also Barrister Fatima who's joining us online. With that, we're also joined by Haitham Naser, Middle East expert on Zoom. Welcome. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining in.
Thank you.
Haitham Naser, we would start from the Gaza Strip, the latest what has happened. How do you see, first of all, the situation when it comes to, passing a bill of annexing the occupied West Bank?
Unfortunately, Netanyahu and his government, his extremist party / allies in the Knesset are using the chance that Trump is pressurizing this government to decrease the tension in Gaza, to issue new laws, new bills in the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament, to legalize, from their perspective, their actions in West Bank. You know, in West Bank, there are almost 4 million Palestinians. There are 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. Before the war now, unfortunately, more than 100,000 were killed and injured. And there are almost 1.5 million inside the occupied areas, which we call, they perceive it as to be Israel now. By numbers, Palestinians are more, 7 million comparing to 6.5 million Israelis. So by annexing more and more lands from West Bank, Israeli Prime Minister and his government is trying to change the realities on the ground, pushing more and more Palestinians by decreasing the space they have and trying to delete all the agreements with the Palestinian Authority, which got its legal status because of the Oslo Agreement and Madrid negotiations in the 90s of the last century. All of this can be demolished by this government of Israel if it gets the American support to do so. Legally, there are many ways to challenge what Israeli government is doing inside their parliament or state, because it's not compulsory for the Palestinians to obey that. But we know that Israelis do not use legal terms or legal means to achieve their goals. They use mainly the military means to achieve their goals, which is why the Palestinians today, the Palestinian Authority, even Palestinians in Gaza, have called for the international community to interfere to stop this kind of steps by Israel to withdraw from all the agreements, withdraw from their previous government's commitments towards establishment of a Palestinian state in the Palestinian territory, and also by distracting people from Gaza by this, and then go back to low intensity military actions in Gaza. Israeli government is trying to maintain the status of war against Palestinians in West Bank, in Gaza, and there were some even measurements against the Palestinians inside the Israeli perceived to be Israeli areas. A lot of arrests have happened in the last 2, 3 days.
That's coming to my mind right now. How do you see the latest breach and violation of international law from the Israeli side? We have seen airstrikes, non-stop bombardments, and they've been killing the Palestinians in the name of Hamas, and Hamas has initiated that. Hamas is, the other way around. There's a blame game going on. How do you see the situation? Where is it going to end?
This is not a legal situation by all means. Israel do not obey the international law. They do not obey their own constitution, even their own laws inside the Israeli parliament.
Human right violation aspect is perhaps that we need to talk about more. So when we do talk about this, talking about this with the perspective of, Israel going forward with this annexation, or at least proposing that it might do so, and otherwise, of course, so many other human rights violations which have been involved, whether it is dehumanizing the human bodies, whether it is committing gross kinds of torture, grievous bodily harm, assault, whatever you may so call it, there are stark human right violations, not only of the Geneva Convention, in addition to that of the UN Charter as well, and then of course a very flagrant violation of ICJ's previous ruling, which very clearly states, at least with reference to this West Bank annexation issue, where illegal occupation of Israeli authorities, that too of Palestinian land, was deemed to be completely illegal and in contravention to our international legal norms. So whether you talk about this issue, whether you talk about dehumanization, whether you talk about recently the ICJ's ruling also about ensuring that people, they do get timely medical aid, they get timely medical, they get food, drink, everything which actually ensures their right to life at a very basic way. What is actually, I feel, the biggest problem here is Israel's
Since you pointed out the dehumanization problem, and whether we see it or not, still we're getting the news 58 unidentified Palestinians have been brought and they've been released. But the problem is that the kind of wounds that we see, the torture that we see on their bodies, some of them are not even recognizable, and they've been put in mass graves in central Deir al-Bala. I mean, this is the worst example if we talk about dehumanization. They've even put on numbers, not names even. So what does international law says about the rights of even dead or those who are illegally detained by Israeli forces without any trial?
To start off with, Maheen, I think this is just not a question of international law. It's something which is very basically enshrined in the law and the constitution of every country. Even if you look at this, from an international perspective, then I'll go on the domestic thing. Human dignity in human life is something, human beings per se are there to be respected even after their lives. So just because somebody has passed away, they have died, the least that they do deserve is a very, respectful kind of a burial, where their families get that opportunity, more particularly under the Geneva Convention, so as to timely identify them, to respectfully bury them. And even if you look at this from an Islamic viewpoint,
Absolutely.
You see this is something which everybody and anybody should get a basic right to actually go ahead with. And then moving on, yeah, so this is something which is, and even if we talk about this from a local perspective, from a domestic perspective, even our laws, and laws of most countries all over the world, they very actively propagate for the rights of the deceased as well. And
Fatima,
before
we'd like
that,
to have a view from our expert Haitham Naser when we talk about the domestic perspective. Haitham Naser, I posed a question very pertinent when it comes to dehumanization of the Palestinians being released from Israel, the dead bodies even. What is your view from the local perspective?
It's the same. This dehumanization did not start after 7th of October. It started in 1948. If you read about the crimes that Israelis have committed under the supervision of British Empire at that time, it is much worse than what we are seeing today. So this is an Israeli pattern that did not change because of the lack of accountability by international community or international law. Palestinians, I don't want to say they got used to this, but they don't expect better from the Israelis. Israelis are doing this on daily basis in West Bank, but the international media do not cover it until it's some big war like or conflict or attack like what happened in Gaza. The Palestinians do not expect any better from Israelis, but Palestinians have developed a lot of experience over the last 7 to 8 decades into how to negotiate with Israelis and how to resist by staying in their places and identifying the bodies, putting these bodies in respectful graveyards to prove that there were people fighting here for their homes and for their land. The issue has two, three levels. On military level, Israel is still winning. Legally, Palestinians have achieved much more in the last 2 years than what they have achieved in the last 30 years. But on humanitarian base, Palestinians are being killed in front of cameras for the last 2 years, and nobody is really offering permanent solutions. The number of trucks that was promised by the Trump deal was 600 trucks per day. After more than 10 days, the total number of the trucks that entered are less than that number, the number of per day, which means the Israelis have manipulated the Trump deal, have manipulated the situation in Gaza to push people to the starvation and use this as a weapon beside the daily
Haitham, you
killing.
talked about lack of accountability when it comes to Israel, and it is committing so many violations. But we also know that there's going to be a peace force coming under Donald Trump, and there are countries ready to send those forces. But at the same time, we see Netanyahu saying that it is only Israel is responsible for the security. I don't know about the yellow lines on ground, on reality. If you can tell us better about the yellow lines, the demarcation that has happened. But still, Israel keeps saying that only Israel is responsible for the security. If it is mentioning the security forces that are going to be entering from outside under Donald Trump's agreement and plan.
The security forces which are proposed by this agreement are not to stop Israelis from killing Palestinians. According to this agreement, and we have heard this from the Vice President of America while he visited Israel 2 days ago, that the security decisions about what happens in Gaza is still in the Israeli hand. So we are not talking about peace or neutral UN supervised power. We are talking about power that's supposed to supervise the process of demilitarization of Hamas, which was part of the deal. But the other part of the deal was that Israelis will not attack the Palestinian areas. Israelis will stop the war. You can see an effort from the American side to send some troops, a group of countries will contribute in those troops to stop Hamas from acting militarily against Israel. But you can't see any effort to stop Israel from attacking Palestine. Which brings us to the first point, which was to which extent there is hypocrisy or there are two standards by Americans. Americans want to guarantee the Israeli safety, not the Palestinian safety, which is again dehumanizing of Palestinians, looking down to them as they do not matter. And we have to remember that the first proposal by Trump was to convert this Gaza Strip to Rivera project, which was a real estate for him. He doesn't care really about how many civilians or Palestinians will be killed, as long as his political and economic interest is served. So
Yeah,
if the
exactly,
Israeli
Haitham. What about the real estate? He said it is an important piece of real estate for me. And does it mean a Palestine without Palestinians? Because, of course, he said that America is going to own the land. Does it mean that?
he cannot own the land. It's against international law, and there are Palestinians still resisting. You know, Americans have been promising Israelis for more than 70 to 80 years to facilitate getting more land from the Palestinians, but it's not that easy. Fortunately, the Palestinians have resisted for 80 years. They can resist 4 more years until Trump leaves the office. if that's the plan from Trump side. But I don't think Trump will dare to implement this plan. This plan is like a card to pressurize Palestinians to say yes to more things that Israel wants. Hamas in the last deal
Farrukh
said
Pitafi
we
would
are.
come over to you, and what is your comment on the entire situation?
Yeah, thank you very much, Maheen. I wanted to actually clarify a few points which are very important. Earlier, when Barrister Sahiba was talking about, humanitarian law being part of every nation's, constitution, let me remind everybody who's watching that Israel does not have a written constitution. It has what it calls basic laws, and those basic laws are fundamentally tilted towards Jewish citizens. So when you talk about in principle, its own principle, established principle, Israel is a state that does not see the humanity of Palestinians, and it treats them as less than a citizen.
Absolutely.
That is very important to remember, because that makes Israel an apartheid state, and that means that while international law seems to be struggling because of the shield the US provides to Israel, it is important for the Saudi-French process to keep putting pressure for better human rights, and those being accepted and encouraged. That is one aspect that is very important. Regarding President Trump's evolution of ideas regarding Gaza, I'm sure what you were saying at the start, during the first meeting after taking over, the first meeting with Netanyahu, he of course floated the idea of an Arabian or Middle Eastern Riviera, but now he has actually moved on from that. His proposal actually talks at length about giving Palestinians all the rights that are needed. Now, this confusion about ISF and IDF, the whole process, once it starts, we are talking about the second phase. The first phase has already been almost implemented. Of course, there are violations, as you pointed out. But the second phase is interesting and important, because then the ISF takes over, IDF withdraws, and ISF, or International Security Force, also establishes a local police which ensures law enforcement at the local level, and then IDF will not be allowed to intervene repeatedly the way they keep on doing it. So I hope in coming days that happens. Of course, it is very difficult because it is a fundamentally extreme right-wing coalition that is ruling Israel. So even for America, it becomes very difficult. But let us hope in coming days things improve.
Absolutely, Pitafi. And coming over to you, Barrister Fatima, how do you see the ICJ's ruling being implemented? We have talked at length about how Israel is not even willing, because, to do the legal things, because it has, one, a cover of US. Second, there is a lack of accountability. How do you see the implementation of this huge decision coming from the International Court of Justice?
I'll just come to that, but before that, I would want to address, what just Pitafi Saab said, and just for the clarification, when I talk about international law, it is law to which member states are made a party to, and by that virtue, whereas of course I do appreciate the fact that Israel particularly has not signed the Rome Statute, which is why it is so conveniently flouting ICC, that is the International Criminal Court's orders. It does come within the purview of ICJ. Whether those decisions are legally and globally implemented or not, that's another question. I'm not denying that implementation is not, it's there. The implementation is a very big question mark, and I'm going to be commenting on that during the second part of my show. But when I talk about the UN charters I gave reference to, and of course in addition to that the Geneva Convention, which actually addresses a lot of human rights issues that you talked about, to that particularly Israel is a party to, which means effectively that ICJ rulings per se would be legally applicable to it. Now the fact that ICJ in itself is unable to implement the same, that is the second question, because here again, of course, diplomatic, political, economic, so many other geopolitical issues, they come into play. To come to your question now, when we do talk about the lack of enforceability, yes, we do appreciate that when it comes to international law, generally when it comes to ruling, there might be some things which might be weak per se. But having said that, what is very important to then see is that these decisions then dictate the way states are also seen, that they do have that potential of causing them reputational harm. They can also bring about economic sanctions to start out with. And then, of course, we have seen, and I wouldn't be surprised once again, if Israel would go ahead with again flouting this decision, the very same way it did when, South Africa took it to the ICC and it actually got a decision actually declaring that, yes, it was committing genocide. So I feel the focus should also be just not on ensuring that, yes, of course, the international law perspective and the human rights perspective is something that is covered, but that is also seen not in isolation with the way the world is also generally, evolving. Because even when we talk about the annexation of the West Bank, whereas, of course, there's no denying to the fact that questions of international law and human rights violations are involved, what we cannot deny is that diplomatically as well, if, Israel actually aims to go ahead with this annexation, it would put a strain on its relationship with the US as well, because we have seen the President Trump.
Haitham, coming over to you now, how fragile do you think the entire situation is looking? You're on ground there, the reality, the kind of emotion that you're witnessing. How do you see the coming days? How do you see the fragility and the nature of the days unfolding?
Unfortunately, we don't expect good steps from the Israeli government, because the Israeli government is in a crisis now. After the end of this war by the Trump agreement, this Prime Minister Netanyahu has to end his tenure in the government. There were calls from the beginning of the war to resign and call for early election, which is delayed because of his manipulation tactics with local and international allies, especially with the US. Now, to survive as a government and to build his new allies kind of group, he needs more time. And for that to happen, he will try to extend the war, the status of war, even if it's low intensity, 2 days attacks and 5 to 10 days of a truce, just to keep his ministers in the government, in the cabinet, especially.
Thank you very much, Haitham Naser, Middle East expert, for joining us and letting us know the reality, what is really happening on ground. For joining us, thank you. Now, Farrukh, coming to you, how would you really conclude this, the kind of discussions and discourse had about what's going on in reality?
Right. Of course, when you talk about a place as conflicted and as troubled as Gaza, and particularly Israel-Gaza relationship, you will always see that Benjamin Netanyahu, while taking pressure from President Trump, will agree to any kind of deal, but in the end he will actively try to undermine it by other means. And because there is an extremist coalition, his own interior minister had said that I am going to bring down the government if this war ends. So with that kind of state of affairs, there is going to be some kind of undercutting of this process, but I am assured repeatedly by President Trump's conviction that this issue has to be followed through. So thanks to our Arab brethren, neighbors of Israel that are primarily Muslim, because of that things can improve, and it is correct that there are international responsibilities that Israel has to follow. Let us hope there is enough pressure to do that.
Barrister Fatima, also coming to you now, how do you see the legal perspective of all this going on, especially now that the bill has passed, and we know that there's going to be implementation, there's going to be trouble implementation rather. How would you define it legally in a legal perspective?
I think here, Maheen, where more pertinent questions might perhaps be that, any law, any country, any jurisdiction has technically that power to pass any law, regardless of the fact how much opposition you get within the parliament itself. For me, if I was to look at it again, I think it would more be a question of how, Israel would then perhaps appreciate that this would actually sabotage the peace deal itself and be counterproductive. And that is something that we also saw the US Secretary, General State, Marco Rubio, actually state. So I think it will have a lot of combination of factors, and it will, unfortunately, in my opinion at least, I feel, undermine this entire effort which has been made not only by the US but by other states as well, so as to promote regional security, to make that lasting effort for justice for the Palestinians, and generally to sort so many other issues out. So I think it will be that step in the wrong direction, where you will actually be sabotaging the work of so many countries who have actually come together, that too, to promote peace in the region and of course in the world as well.
Farrukh, how would you comment on a very quick comment?
Yeah, regarding the legal processes, of course, when you talk about Israel's own legal system, we have seen repeatedly the kind of annexation that has been enabled by the courts of Israel. So I am not expecting any miracles, but remember that recently President Trump had said that he will not let Netanyahu annex West Bank. So that is a big commitment, and I hope the Committee of Nations holds the president to his words.
Right, and this was a detailed discussion on what is happening and what's latest from Gaza. We had amazing guests as well, but right now we'll be talking about Pakistan's role in international diplomacy. Of course, Pakistan has made a huge name on the global stage, and to talk more about this, we've been joined by Mr. Raza Bashir, Tarar, former ambassador from Zoom. Thank you so much for joining in.
Most welcome.
Mr. Tarar, there's a lot to say when we talk about the diplomatic success of Pakistan. Pakistan has achieved a lot, whether the multilateral forum, the UN, SARC, OIC, using its voice for Palestine, or be it the bilateral relations, for example, evolving relations with China, or the new momentum being gained in the US relationship. How would you comment on the recent success of diplomatic, series of events?
Well, as a former diplomat myself, it's very heartening, and I would like to congratulate the government, the Prime Minister, specifically also the Deputy Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister, and all the practitioners of diplomacy who are working for Pakistan tirelessly. I think we are in a very good place right now, and we need to basically build upon that, and not just get too caught up in chest thumping and self-congratulation. We need to build on that, and for furtherance of our interests and our reputation in the Committee of Nations. Thanks.
How would you see the shift in the foreign policy? We talk about that from geopolitics to geoeconomics, and also the core relationships with the key global partners such as US. Let's have a comment from you when it comes to Pakistan relationship with US. How do you see it gaining momentum?
Well, Pakistan has had a very long-standing relationship with the US. And I would say
nobody can ignore the fact that our relationship with US is something which is
that the patch that we had, not that I wouldn't be so reckless as to suggest that the US is kind of at loggerheads with India. Obviously, they have, quite a deep relationship with India as well. But over the last many years, we were seeing that being done basically at the expense of Pakistan. And some people would say Pakistan should be sidelined. Some people would say Pakistan should be ignored. Some would say, Pakistan is inconsequential. So what is happening right now is basically a much needed course correction by the US. And, the realization on their part that Pakistan is too significant a player to be ignored or to be cast aside. Thank you.
Also, if we talk about CPEC, the second phase, it is a huge diplomatic success because there were a lot of, terrorism, and Pakistan has successfully, launched a campaign, anti-terrorism campaign, and Pakistan has really given a kind of guarantee to not just Chinese but the international investors as well, and that is why we are successfully in the CPEC phase 2, where Pakistan is now envisioning a lot more than just infrastructure. It is envisioning the industrial growth. It is also envisioning the agricultural and technological growth.
Definitely, and I think the resolve and grit of the Pakistani state, of all our concerned entities, is basically bearing fruit, and our determination to basically press ahead despite the losses that we have incurred. So I think this is basically having an impact. Obviously, not to downplay the importance of peaceful resolution of matters and negotiations and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we have to realize that there are elements who are basically impossible to negotiate with. They have a certain agenda. As Winston Churchill said, a fanatic is one who would not change his mind and would not even change the subject. So I think we have to be determined with a moral clarity to basically understand that our aspirations to progress and to have our rightful place in the community of nations cannot go hand in hand with pussyfooting when it comes to the activities of non-state actors and disruptive elements. So I think the Chinese have also seen that. They have seen our resolve, and we are all determined to basically take our joint endeavors ahead. CPEC is too significant an undertaking to be just sacrificed at the altar of the egos of certain individuals. So I think people have seen the result of our actions, and the world will see more. And inshallah, sooner rather than later, we will see this menace eliminated. Thank you.
Raza, Bashir, Tarar Saab, when we talk about the core relationships, on one hand we have US, then we talked about China, the CPEC phase 2, it's a huge breakthrough in our diplomatic achievements. Let's come to the Middle Eastern part, because strategically and geographically, yes, Pakistan is bridging a, it's more like a link, South Asian, Central Asian and Middle East as well. But there's a renewal in the Middle Eastern relationships as well, be it the investments from the GCC or the Saudi Arab Pact, the defense pact that has entirely changed the strategic map on the on the global stage for Pakistan.
Well, it's a very welcome development. Basically, dovetails with the general contours of our Maheen and rather brotherhood with the Arab states. We have very long-standing and very deep and mutually respectful relations with all the countries. And now I think having seen the way Pakistan has stood up to that imaginary sort of Leviathan that India was pretending to be, has earned it a lot of respect among nations. And they have seen that Pakistan is not an entity that India can just tread upon and basically kind of browbeat. So many factors have contributed to that, and at the same time, a determination and seriousness on part of Pakistan. The realization that we have to work very hard to unlock the potential of these relationships that we have with the GCC countries and Muslim countries as a whole. So, inshallah.
Absolutely, Ambassador Saab, since you are a policy hand with your domain experience, let me ask you, you must have seen the statement coming from Pakistan's ambassador to the US that Pakistan has offered its good offices to actually reconcile between China and America. That is one aspect. And then, particularly in our own regional context, SAARC seems to be paralyzed because of one country, that is India. But SAARC countries, other South Asian countries, want to actually work together in tandem. Can you tell me how exactly is it possible for Pakistan to improve its diplomatic game so that Pakistan can truly work as a bridge between all these countries and these interests?
Well, sir, to be honest, Pakistan's diplomatic game, as very nicely put it, is already very much there, and it's very functional. And basically, in the U.S.-China context, well, we all know, and many of us remember that the breakthrough that the U.S. had with China was with the good through the good offices of Pakistan. So let me be at the risk of maybe ruffling some feathers. I would say that Pakistan is in a very unique position in the sense that we know the Chinese and the Americans are probably better than others. And when we say that we can, I don't think we are saying that, or we are trying to punch above our weight by saying that we are going to mediate between the two, or we have some magic solution to the, seemingly intractable trade disputes that they have. But I think we can definitely play a part in, dispelling suspicions and to basically making, people realize that there's not much value in military conflict, and we have to work together to basically, combat various non-military problems that beset humanity. COVID was a big wake-up call for all of us. So I think we need to work together. Regarding the region, sir, very rightly pointed out, it's an immensely gifted and a very large, in terms of population and area, region, which is bogged down by this, ego trip that Mr. Modi is having, and he's trying to, I don't know which actor he's, inspired by. God help us all. I hope he comes to his senses. I hope this Bihar and other elections are over so that, some sense can prevail. But I think in the region generally, there is a feeling that India is not acting as it ought to, what its size and, the gravitas it should be showing demands. So other countries are basically wondering, when will we have the opportunity to unlock the potential of our relationship? There is so much to be gained. There is so much potential of intra-SAARC.
Thank you very much, Raza, Bashir, Tarar, former ambassador, for joining us and letting us know the details. And of course, your insights on how diplomatically successful Pakistan has been on the global stage. And now we'd go over to Barrister Fatima. Barrister Fatima, how do you see Pakistan's now reaching new heights in the global stage, especially a nation which is law-abiding and also securing a non-permanent seat at the UNSC?
I think that's a very good question that you've put, because whenever we talk about Pakistan strengthening itself in front of the world, I think the narrative should just not be limited towards diplomacy. Of course, that is extremely important. What it should also talk about is the fact that Pakistan has always been a very strongly abiding international law country. Not only that, in terms of its local development as well, we've seen not one, rather various laws being passed, which of course reinforce the fact that Pakistan's international commitments are something which have been taken very seriously. Now, to address your question with regards to Pakistan being elected to the UNHR Council, that too for a period of 3 years, I think this in itself very clearly reiterates the fact that Pakistan is there is clearly pinpointing towards the fact that Pakistan is a country which is very serious about not only going with its international law commitments, whatever those may be, but also in addition to that, also looking running into human rights violations. And not only that, when we do talk about the recent, UNGA speech that we heard of the Prime Minister, I think it was very good that he placed a lot of focus on the human rights issues that are being there, be it with regards to Palestinian suffering, be it with regards to the Kashmiri suffering, and then of course how climate justice also addresses all these issues. And then moving on, I also feel that when we do talk about human rights and Pakistan strengthening itself in the human rights arena, what we must talk about is this very important issue of refugee protection, which a lot of critics, rightly or wrongly so, they put forward that the fact that Pakistan is sending all these refugees back to Afghanistan, that might raise human rights concerns. So the fact that Pakistan has also hosted all these refugees for such a long time, that in itself also shows that yes, Pakistan was a humane country to do just that. So moving on, I think here what is very important.
Yeah, Farrukh, I'd come to you now. Navigating its way in a multipolar world, how do you see Pakistan still maintaining its strategic autonomy while balancing between two great powers? One you see US and the other at the end you see China. How do you see that?
One, I'm totally going to speak against this idea of multipolar world, or for that matter, balancing between two superpowers. Why? Because we are living in a very different age. We keep on going back to the Cold War mentality, and there lies the biggest problem. The world now is deeply integrated, especially the US and China are deeply interdependent. And that's why I keep on opposing the idea of decoupling, right? Now, Pakistan's capacity to not balance between the two, but actually to hug and actually go for a huddle, that can be arranged. How? Pakistan has this great gift that Pakistan has been very close to China and will continue to be so. And Pakistan and America are very close as well when it comes to, you see the length of their diplomacy and their history. So both these countries, we understand instinctively how they can actually work or prosper in tandem. And then look at what we have got. Beautiful geography. We are connected with so many regions, right? With China, with Central Asia, with South Asia, and of course, because of this recent role, also in the Middle East, right? The Arabian world. And then our diaspora is very capable.
Yeah, not just international, Farrukh. I would also like to highlight some regional connection, like you say, it's integrated, deeply integrated. If we talk about Doha agreement right now, where is Pakistan regionally standing? It's now in a very firm position. How beautiful you think this diplomatic move is?
Right. Regarding Doha, regarding Afghanistan?
Yes.
Because we are going to see what actually becomes of that later, day after tomorrow on 25th, when both countries are meeting in Istanbul. But I tell you one thing for sure. I was recently, last month I was in China, right? And there we had these interactions with the SAARC countries. The countries which are not India, but which are SAARC countries. And everybody was really willing to work together to ensure that as long as India does not come to its senses, we can all work together. So my point is that we have great geography, and we also have economic potential, which is aligning. And finally, when you talk about human resource, a couple of days ago, there was Diwali, and President Trump, when he sat, he was surrounded by billionaires or people, Fortune 400 companies, which are Indian in origin. So
thank you so much, both of you. Unfortunately, we're a little pressed with time. Thank you, Barrister Fatima Shaheen, for giving us your view on the legal perspective of the entire situation, not only what's happening in Gaza, but of course, Pakistan's diplomatic success. And also, there's a deeply embedded world now where we see a lot of integration coming from all sides, and Pakistan is leading its way towards the global stage. It has made its name in the spotlight once again, and Pakistan knows now how to work together, and it has great geography, and of course it has great potential. This is all for tonight's show. This is Maheen Jafri signing off.